I try my hardest to get the best out of people every day.
Welcome to Island Influencers, where we share stories of successful business owners, experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based or with influence in the Isle of Man. This podcast is brought to you by Thornton Chartered Financial Planners, because great financial planning has the power to change your life. Now here's your host, Sharon Sutton.
My guest this week is Joff Whitten, an intelligent and creative education leader with over 25 years of experience working in cultural and learning settings. Joff has managed and delivered a diverse and exciting range of successful learning and engagement projects, working with organisations of varying size, supporting those with little opportunity, especially children and young people, to find the joy and opportunity they need to reach a place of success. He is the Chief Executive Officer at the Isle of Man Children's Centre, an entirely independent Manx charity turning difficult life experiences into brighter futures for children, young people and their families. They're based on a farm located just outside of Douglas, offering all sorts of amazing things to the people they work with. Joff is responsible for driving forward a new chapter for the charity, creating and delivering long-term strategies, and placing the charity in the hearts and minds of everyone on the island. Joff, who is also a talented musician and artist, says he tries his hardest to get the best out of people every day. Due to a technical issue in the studio, on this occasion we couldn't capture every one of Joff's answers to my usual questions to the standard that we at Island Influencers would feel comfortable putting out. So that said, I hope you enjoy my conversation with Joff Whitten in episode 88 of Island Influencers. Welcome to Island Influencers, Joff Whitten. Thank you very much for coming along. It's
Thank you for having me.
It's really good to see you. Now, while we normally kick off with these podcasts, are pretty informal. We've got your coffee.
I have a coffee.
Why don't we go back in time and let's see where you've come from and how you end up being in your current role of as Chief Executive Officer at the Children's Centre.
Sure, yeah. I grew up in a town called Macclesfield in England, in the UK.
Yep.
It's at the sort of base of the Pennines, sort of in the footprint of Manchester, but not exactly Manchester.
Yeah.
It's the most, I suppose the claim to fame from Macclesfield is a band called Joy Division, or New Order came from Macclesfield.
Yeah,
I've heard of them. Okay. Or the Mac Lads, which probably isn't as salubrious, but there you go. Yeah, I grew up there. I went to a normal comprehensive school. I have 3 brothers, 1 older, 2 younger. I had a fairly standard teenage experience in the sense of I didn't fit in. I didn't really enjoy school.
What teenager does?
I know, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I found a lot of pleasure from hobbies outside of school. I've essentially just screwed up my A-levels by not really wanting to go to school, and just started not being naughty as such, but just not attending and doing other things.
Your brain was somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. But this is incredibly frustrating for my parents, who really wanted me to succeed, and school was seen as to be the thing that kind of helps you succeed. And I was reasonably bright. That kind of idea of people being assigned to a certain career path where it was expected to be university and then a career afterwards. But I really started just dropping out and fell into music, which was the first thing that I really, really locked into in my life. So my early 20s was spent doing an awful lot of music. I'd go to I was being in bands and doing the classic again. Sort of, it's a very teenage boy thing to do, but being in rock bands and growing my hair long, nose piercings and
you must have some profile photographs from about then you could share.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of glad it's pre the sort of social media age, if I'm honest, because some of those photos.
So what was your you say you play guitar?
Yeah, absolutely.
Lead guitar, bass guitar.
Lead guitar and writing songs, and thinking we were going to be the next Nirvana. That was essentially the kind of the world I was occupying for 3-4 years.
Great. How far did you get?
I mean, never. I mean, it's a strange one, isn't it? We did okay. We did some really nice gigs with people, and we met some really good, other musicians and artists and whatever else. And so it's kind of part of the Manchester scene for a period of time in the mid 90s.
Yeah.
Went far afield doing gigs up and down the country. Had a great time doing it, and actually, ironically, looking back on it, it was incredibly good training for working in the career that I've ended up doing, because of the versatility, the sort of dependability, the flexibility, all those sorts of words that you need to...
Stage presence.
Well, that's fear of a microphone, exactly. So yeah, that was great, and I would never regret it. But it was also sort of it's an interesting period because I wasn't a successful musician, and I really enjoyed my time doing it. But there's there's an element of like carrying that. Oh, it didn't go as far as it could have done. And a few peers did go on to have very successful music careers. Right. And, and that's the great, super for them. Don't get me wrong, but it's just...
Anybody we might have heard of?
Well, I half mentioned before we started, but... I did on the podcast, but just got a good friend who plays with New Order, who joined around about late 90s. And other bands from around that sort of time, lots of Manchester names as well. So the Stone Roses were around my life, which was quite exciting. This sounds name dropping, and I do feel embarrassed about it. There you go. I'll tell you my Johnny Marr story. Johnny Marr was the guitar player from the Smiths, probably regarded as one of the most influential indie guitar players ever. And I was at the height of my pomp in a bar in Manchester with a good friend called Pete, who knew Johnny very well. And Pete introduced me to Johnny and said, "This is Joff. He also plays guitar." And I said, "Oh, do you play guitar?" To which Johnny Marr said, "Yes, I do." And I went, "Oh, really? Oh, jolly good. Well done for you for playing guitar. Have you played long, Mr. Johnny?" And this went on for a little bit, and then Pete kind of went, "That's Johnny Marr from the Smiths." And I had a really embarrassing kind of revelation of, "Oh no, I didn't recognise you." He was lovely about it though, and he was nothing but just amused at this sort of whippersnapper pretending he knew more than him.
Excellent. We've all done it.
Exactly.
Oh, brilliant. So what happened after you sort of gave up on your rock star ambition? I never really... It's always around me. I still love making music, and it's always been sort of in the back of my mind. But I then fell into doing an art degree, slightly by accident, because I was between bands, between spaces, not really sure what I was doing with myself, and I went into my local college and had a bit of a waffly conversation with the careers people. Mm-hmm. And as it happened, the head of the foundation art course was there at the time, and Jane, she was called. She overheard me talking and saying all this sort of waffly nonsense, as usually comes out of my mouth. And Jane sort of tapped me on the shoulder and essentially said, "You're starting the foundation course tomorrow." And I said, "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't really like colouring in. I'm not very good at painting." And she said, that's not what an art course is about, and you'll be brilliant. Just give it a go. Give it a week, and if you don't like it, we can start again. And it was just brilliant. It was an amazing experience, and I love doing my foundation. And many people who've done art degrees quite often say their foundation year is their favourite. I absolutely loved my degree, but my foundation was a great period of time. And essentially it was kind of being rewarded for messing about, if that makes any sense, because you get given materials and it's like, do something with it, and it's like, hooray, and you get to be silly or expressive or creative, and it really, really locked into me at that time. And then got close to the end of the foundation year, and I was saying to Jane, who was the head of the course, "Oh, thanks, that was great." And she went, "Well, you're off to university now." It's like, "But I can't, I'm mid-20s, you don't do that when you're 25, you go and have jobs." And she went, nope, off to university with you. Really? How did you manage to secure? Was there grant funding for that?
No, I scraped. I happened to be working at the time for a touring orchestra that did concerts at stately homes in the UK. It was an orchestra based around Manchester, and they would tour across the whole of the UK. So it was a 3-4 month tour, and I was crewing for them. So I wasn't playing; I was crewing, and
amazing.
Which is great. So it coincided really nicely with being able to go to university, and sort of essentially paid for my way. And Mum and Dad helped as well, because they always help. They help at every point in your life, don't they, really?
They do.
And so I kind of balanced the two against each other, which was phenomenal for me. So I went to Sheffield University to do fine art, which was just fantastic. It was just a great experience as well. So and again, 3 years of exploring all sorts of different ideas and different processes and mediums and things. And when I finished my degree, and I got a first, which I'm ever so proud of, because I messed up my A-levels so badly, I just dropped out of school, that coming away with a first was...
Congratulations, that's a huge achievement.
I was, not to sort of do it was massive for me, actually. It was a huge kind of affirmation that I was not a waste of space, I kind of...
But, do you think going later gave you a better sense of focus about why it was more important, or what it meant more to you, perhaps, than if you'd gone as an 18-year-old?
I think definitely. I was just nodding then whilst you were talking. I shouldn't do that on podcasts. But no, absolutely.
I should film it, then it would be fine, wouldn't it?
No, definitely. And I think I do this now with my career when I'm working with young people who feel a little bit lost and not sure. And I say there's no rush to make a conclusion. And in actual fact, if you find the right time in your life, you'll throw yourself into it. Throw yourself into it in a way that you perhaps won't have the enthusiasm or engagement. So I happened to be going to university at the same time as my younger brother, who was doing philosophy in Sheffield. He's a good few years younger than me. I just went to all of his lectures because you could. I didn't realise you were allowed to do that. But you can just walk into any lecture within reason and just sit down and take part. So I worked a 40-hour week at university doing university things because I could go to the studios, I could just take advantage of the library, I went to as many lectures as I could. It was a great time for me. It really worked for me at that point.
Sounds astonishing.
Yeah, it was lovely. It was lovely. Yeah. And then after that, I had a lot of people would go on to do master's courses. I needed to work, so I was looking for jobs. And as it happened, Jane from my foundation course phoned me and said, come back and work for us and teach at the college. And so she was a proper mentor to me. She probably, really helped me, find a direction in my life at that time, which was I owe great debt towards. And that was lovely because then I went back to teach at the college. All of the lecturers were kind of half practicing artists as well, balancing life, when you make and teach at the same time. So we had this lovely culture of, the students would go home at 4ish, 5ish, and we'd all stay for a few hours and make a bit ourselves, which was just lovely. It was a really, quite, I'll use the word collegiate, but it felt like a bit of a gang.
Sounds like the ultimate work-life balance for somebody artistic.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I wouldn't say it's perfect, don't get me wrong, but it was for the time of my life at that point, it was great, and it was a lot of fun. And a good gang to work with as well, which always helps. Just had that kind of, I did that for 4 years. I was doing some other bits as well. I did a lovely job working in complicated social areas of South Manchester, doing story reading with preschool kids. Which was there's a project called Sure Start that was in the UK, which is about linking services together, and so I did that, and so libraries working with healthcare visitors, working with GPs, and all those sorts of things. Really, integrated thinking, and so I was doing that at the same time as teaching, but also trying to do some music and also do some art. So sort of flexible living as you do in your later 20s.
And how did that shape your thinking?
I mean, I think. Hindsight's so fascinating, isn't it? When you look at your career historically and you go through it.
Well, knowing where you ended up,
exactly. I think social engagement. Actually, when my art stuff when I was at university was all about social engagement as well. I've always been really interested in that idea. I've always wanted to be someone who's helpful and who contributes towards society and contributes to a greater positivity. So doing that story reading thing was just part of that thinking. It just seemed like a lovely piece of work to do, and I'm quite silly. I'm a man boy or a boy man, whichever way around you want to say it, and I think I always will be ever so slightly. So that it appealed to my sense of humour and my sense of play and my sense of nonsense. So I really enjoyed doing that. But it wasn't quite balancing for me. Various other reasons. I was wanting to change jobs, and a position became available at the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, which is just outside of Leeds in England. It's about 500 acres of absolutely beautiful landscape with sculptures, great big lumps of metal and other unusual things just in fields.
Okay.
And I was essentially education coordinating then, so that's kind of running the education program. I'm going to say that about almost all of my jobs. I've been very lucky with my jobs. I've had really positive experiences from most of them. But yeah, that was great. That was open air, working with sculpture materials, working with kids, working with disadvantaged communities, particularly in Wakefield rather than Leeds. That was the more of the footprint of where it was.
And kind of back nearer where you're from, I suppose.
Exactly. So exactly. Yeah.
Mum and Dad would be happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
You get laundry done.
Yeah, still do. But did that for a few years, and then my life, I was living with my girlfriend at the time, who was in Leeds, and she finished her degree, and we were looking to just kind of go elsewhere, and then London became a possibility, and I got a job working at somewhere called the Courtauld Institute of Art, which is a really prestigious museum in Somerset House on the Thames in London. Mm-hmm. So a complete handbrake change in terms of the type of work, because it went from bits of metal in in fields to traditional old paintings by grandmasters, and really interesting things like Cassoni, which are Italian Renaissance wedding chests, all that sort of really interesting historical stuff. I've always really enjoyed history, really interested in history, so it wasn't a huge change for me, I guess, in some ways, but the objects were very, very different. And my job there again was about broadly, generally engaging the public with these rather fascinating and rather academic objects. And the Courtauld was a university as well as being a museum.
Okay.
So lots of academics,
Yeah.
and my role was bridging the academics to the into the world around, to the general public.
Mm-hmm.
And it was lovely. It was lovely work, really interesting. And, every day I get to do fascinating things. There was lots of conservation there. And in my early days, went into the conservation studio, and they had a Michelangelo. It was a print. I thought it was a drawing, but it was a Michelangelo. And the conservator was with looked like a rubber, rubbing out the paper, and I was just like, what on earth are you doing? And actually it was a print, and they were cleaning it, and it was a special cleaning process. But it was just really stunning and startling to kind of encounter that in that way of, are you supposed to be doing that?
Yeah.
But you're not supposed to do this, but my little finger has touched the corner of a Michelangelo drawing, which I'm rather excited about, in a way that my hand has touched a piece of paper that Michelangelo touched, which is, small things, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's rather nice, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Surprised you didn't get arrested, but yeah, okay.
I asked for permission in the sense of, what's that up there? Look, touch, carry on.
Yeah, there's a saying, isn't it? Ask for permission, beg for forgiveness.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so what happened after that? But in London, and then...
Yeah, we did London for a while, and I got married. We didn't particularly want to settle down in London, so... It was an idea of moving on and moving elsewhere. Amanda's career was moving on elsewhere as well, so we were looking. And then I had a period of time where I struggled a bit, actually. I kept going for really nice senior jobs and not quite getting them, so kind of getting down to the last two. Rigorous interview processes where you go through 3 or 4 stages, and you've got to present things to boards or present things to various people, and I just kept missing out by a tiny bit, which was... it became quite debilitating. Not debilitating, that's the wrong word. What's the word I'm looking for? Demoralising is the word I'm looking for. Because you get to that point of going, well, one's just something, isn't it? 2, never mind. Then 3, is there something wrong with the way I'm presenting myself? Or,
but it's the opportunity to develop, isn't it? I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's a very nice positive way of looking at it. Yeah. At the time, I found it quite hard.
And I'm sure it's disappointing to be turned down, but at the same time, there's growth opportunities, surely.
No, exactly.
Or it wasn't meant for you.
Or the kind of one door shuts, another door opens type analogy.
Well,
exactly.
Clearly.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I took on a job working for the Arts Council England, which was a regional job, and it was called The Bridge, and it was about integrating services, so connecting things together, specifically around children and young people who had disadvantage, and trying to engage with, I call it funded local arts and community, arts and culture community type organisations. Because part of the UK funding, there was an obligation to do that sort of work. So our role was to do our very best to make sure it impacted in the right sort of way. So
this was a government position?
Within reason, it was Quango stuff. So it was sidestep of government, sidestep of funding to kind of move it out of Arts Council's specific part. But I mean, that's detail. It was more advisory and consultation. It was that sort of work. And I would drive around all over across the east of England, going to lots of lovely places and talking to people about what they did, essentially was my role. And then try and nudge them in a direction or bring them together with some other organisation or encourage best practice. So it was such a learning curve, that job. It was great. Having worked mostly in visual arts, being a musician-ish by learning and bits and pieces. Then start to engage with dance organisations or with circus was huge, actually. Circus in the east of England was huge. And, these are the kind of areas that I wasn't quite so confident around. It was great because it kind of starting to understand other people's motivations and drivers. And, structural management as well, you need to start looking at that side of things. So it was a really good training program for me, learning to become, hopefully the leader I am now today.
So even greater skill set.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it was fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. You did that for 5 years by the looks of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And some nice bits as well alongside of that. So I sat on the Heritage Lottery Fund committee during that time, which was amazing learning for me now in terms of how to write funding proposals, because you get to read everybody else's funding proposals.
Yeah.
You say, that was a good sentence. I wouldn't put that in there. That side of things.
Yeah, no, I do. Yeah, I sat on a sports council for 12 years.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, yes. And I know you do learn a lot, but from both sides of the fence, really. Yeah.
So that was, that went through. I think it was 5 years, wasn't it? Five cycles of doing it, and an opportunity came up to work with a very, very well-renowned touring theatre company in the east of England. They're based in Ipswich. Ipswich was pretty much of an epicentre of really cool, cutting-edge cultural practice, and there were quite a lot of decent, exciting contemporary arts organisations there. So I really fancied giving that a bit of a go. Theatre's not really the world I occupy, and particularly physical theatre was another one of these things. It's like I don't know anything about it, but I had that kind of idea of, I worked in a museum where I didn't particularly like old paintings, and now I really like old paintings. So working with a physical theatre company, which is very well regarded, I'm sure.
Yeah, it is. I did a bit of research before we spoke today, and they do a lot of touring as well.
Absolutely.
Don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. But I didn't really fit in there. Sometimes there are those situations where you don't quite fit into an organisation. There's a real divide between the structural organisation and the artistic side. Yeah. And I think that's kind of classically normal for a smallish, mid-scale thing. Sure. It's not a surprise, but I would think I was wanting something slightly different from the role, and. Yeah, so I didn't stay there for long. I was only there for a year, which is really unusual for me. Normally, I'm quite committed to jobs and give them a good.
Yeah, I can see that over your career. You've stayed a number of years, multiple years, not just one. So
no, absolutely.
So and then from then over to here.
Yeah, exactly. But I do talk about the previous one because I think it's very useful for me in my career to have had a situation where it's not been perfect. I think that's a good learning experience to go through, because you can recognise the bits that you think, I'd like to carry that with me, and I'd like to leave that piece, that approach or that relationship behind. So it was important to go through it. And then the opportunity came up here to work for the Children's Centre. And I joined a really curious point, I think, in the Children's Centre's journey is maybe the fairest way of phrasing it.
No, for sure. I mean, for somebody who lives in the Isle of Man and been here a long time, it used to be a number of nursery buildings, sort of nursery, government-funded nurseries in central Douglas, and now it's a farm. Yeah,
and I think for people that don't know that journey, they might be quite surprised by that.
Well, I was when I did the research. I thought, I haven't seen them around for a long time.
Right.
Oh, they're there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll try and do the history in a slightly condensed kind of way, but we are an old charity, and one of the oldest on Ireland, so about 150 years of history, which started off with all sorts of different kinds of services. It's this pre-NHS, quite obviously, it's 100 years pre-NHS. So it would
be like the children's home, would it, originally?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And hospital beds for the destitute, and those sorts of sponsored cots, and that kind of thinking.
Okay.
The modern version of the Children's Centre really started with Peggy Pugh, which was sort of mid-80s. I'll get my dates slightly wrong. And that became, as you say, kind of government-funded nursery provision, because there was a little bit of a gap in nursery provision. There's after-school play clubs as well. Doing some delivered contracts for government around things like fostering and residential, plus charitable work, supporting those who miss out on bits. After Peggy, there was a period of time that John Knight was the CEO, and he oversaw a really significant period of growth and expansion of the charity. And it's great John Knight's back on Ireland now. He's taken on the role of being CEO of Hospice, which we're all thrilled about. I had a coffee with John not so long ago. It's the first time I've actually met him, and it's great. It was really nice to sort of talk through his time and where we are now. So in a way, as a charity, we were a charity, but also a delivery partner with government, and that's always a bit of a blurred line. So things like the nurseries were part of a piece of work to just keep the charity operational and delivering government services. And then when the government services, so particularly contracts went up for tender and renewal, and they went to other organisations, which is completely within the frame of how it works. It's totally legitimate, and quite often government do move services to other providers just because of looking at, different requirements, different measurements.
Budgets.
That's the one I'm kind of skirting around, exactly. Financial measures, usually.
Financial, and if you've got a private sector organisation that can do
absolutely.
it, that's what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
And it should happen.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, it's nothing wrong with it. It's just part of it. It's just, as it happened, the Children's Centre didn't renew on any of the contracts. And so that coincided with a period of time of it changing size, shape and scale quite quickly. And I have to speak around this relatively delicately because it wasn't a period of time when I was there.
Okay.
But we didn't do a super job with some of the people we were supporting and working with. So I think one of the ones that I think still causes a few people quite a lot of distress is the way that the nurseries were closed really quickly. And there's an enormous amount of childcare providers on Ireland, and if nurseries are closed quickly, that's really problematic for families who get information they've got to find some other provision.
And to keep jobs. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, no, I get it.
And it's a real shame, and it happened, and we could have been better at communicating it at the time, I think, and we could have perhaps planned it slightly differently, but it is what it is. However, during all of that period of time of government tenders and government services, the charitable services were still running and still operating, and have been consistently for a good length of time, 25 years. And the role of the charitable services is to provide provision when statutory care stops. So, for example, children in school have there's a government responsibility to know where every child is in school, or the school should know where the child is. And then there is full-time care. So those kids who, for whatever reason, the families can't provide, or the home situation is broken down, or the behavioural complications. So there's that, and then there's school, and then there's the gaps in between those two things, where the kids can't quite be in school, can't quite cope being in school, or very disruptive within school, or the school support is not quite enough for their needs. There's this kind of great kind of swathe of children and young people who are in this sort of what we call the missing middle, and the charitable services were to kind of operate there, to give some kind of meaning or consistency to children and families that are in that space. So for if there is a social worker assigned to a family, that's great. Then the social worker's responsibility is to look after the family and make sure they have care and provision. And if they're able to stay in school, then that's absolutely brilliant, because they should be getting the learning that they kind of need. But then there are those who
can't.
Yeah, exactly.
So in that case, you take up that.
Yeah, we try to.
Space.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't for a minute declare that we're fulfilling every need, because there's a lot of young people in that space, and that space is growing and growing and growing. But that's exactly that's where we operate, and that's the kind of care that we wish to provide. And
I guess it's even more. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but did COVID have an impact on that?
Oh, significantly, yeah, absolutely. And there's things like the developmental milestones that kids would have just missed. Even though we had a short-ish lockdown on Ireland, there was still that kind of transition from year 6 to year 7 when they were learning certain kind of behaviours and certain kinds of needs. And it's too easy to say it, but there was a period of time when parents were trying to work remotely. Schools were doing their very best. It's not a school moment, but doing their very best to teach remotely, and kids were trying to sort of self-manage when they were 5 to 12. It's really, absolutely. So we have
awful period. Yeah,
we've got a good few years at least to recover from this. It won't be a quick one, because if those milestones have been missed, that impacts behaviour. So, for example, we're doing a lot of work with year 9s at the moment, and 2-3 years ago they were at this year 6 to year 7 point, and so they've missed those transitions.
So what age of child would that be?
So you essentially, rule of thumb is add 5, so it's about 14-year-olds, 13-14-year-olds, which is always a corker of a year anyway, because that's when the kind of the hormonal changes start.
Yeah, everything happens, doesn't it? And they have to do the life-changing exams and
options.
Options.
You don't even know who you are, but you've got to decide what you're going to be. Huh?
Oh dear.
So it's it's
good
always
old academia.
Yeah, exactly. It's a peak period of upheaval for kids, but essentially that's where we try to operate.
Yes.
And the farm, it's interesting to say, in the nurseries, and now we're a farm. We've had the farm for a good number of years, actually about 12 years, and it was for a period of time. It was called the community farm as a specific kind of project around community farming, if you like, social engagement as well. Then when the charity was changing size, shape and scale, the board made the decision, and I think incredibly wise decision, to relocate the whole charity to the farm. So that's our single base of operation. We work half on site and half off site, and I should say this is my job too, but I'm incredibly proud of the farm. It's a brilliant resource.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's lovely. We've been working really hard on it, and instigated some great changes. So, for example, we've got 36 meters of solar panels and air source heat pumps and Tesla Powerwall.
I saw that on your map.
Yeah, exactly.
On your photograph on your website. Yeah. So you're self-sufficient from the end of February to the beginning of October.
Yeah, we do have an electricity bill in winter, and I think so we're still buying some power off the grid, but we're trying our hardest to be self-sufficient, and that's just a maths equation really of looking at it across a couple of seasons and then working out.
It's a super message.
Yeah, well that too. Yeah, it's partly to make us more financially resilient as a charity, but passing on that positive actions and positive ways of living to the kids that we support. But just to waffle about the farm slightly, because it's not as simple as just a farm. Yes, we do have animals, and yes, we do grow some food, and yes, we do have lovely plants and walks and open air space. But we've got kayaks and mountain bikes and mountain boards and climbing equipment and gorge walking equipment for encouraging kids to do adventurous activities. We also have pottery and craft spaces and a resident art therapist in partnership with the Manx Children's Art Therapy. Game spaces for allowing kids to be creative and flexible. We've got technology room with virtual reality and 3D printers and Lego. Lego's hugely important to all children. But that kind of design thinking and that analytical and engineering thinking. It includes woodwork and metalwork as well. Plus social spaces, so eating and cooking and making food, and that sort of normalising family interaction as well, if you like. It's that kind of thinking. It's very hard for me to talk about specific cases of the people we work with because of the nature of the
of course.
But anecdotally, there's a teenage girl that we're working with who is in. She's at war with her mum, but knows that her mum really likes cakes, so often makes a cake during her session to take home. And the war hasn't stopped, but it's just something about that little moment of emotionality and sort of there's still that connection between them. We just got to support them to the point where they're no longer kind of squabbling with each other all the time and see something more positive. So I find those things really moving, those little stories, because they're
sure. So do you provide coaching?
Indeed.
From the way people think and make things up in their heads.
Sure. No, absolutely. We are not a therapy capital T organisation, but we're a supportive learning therapeutic lowercase t organisation. So we use quite a few skills to deliver what we do. So coaching's a good analogy. We use something called the Solihull methodology, which is it is a healthcare strategy, but it's about just kind of understanding what are the drivers behind people's decision making.
Yeah, sure. Because you've got I'll Listen as well.
Absolutely.
So do you work with I'll Listen?
We do, yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of cross-referrals between what they do in terms of listenings in school. They do have some talking therapists as well to do proper clinical counselling. Mm-hmm. We're more, I guess you would call, preventative or recuperative. So if somebody is getting to a point of feeling a bit challenged, we're a good organisation to work with at that time. Or they've been through a period of talking therapy, and then we're that recuperative afterwards as well. Yeah. So again, we work with CAMS as much as we possibly can.
What's CAMS? Sorry.
Oh, beg pardon. There's loads of acronyms in the world that I work with. Yeah. That's the Children and Adolescent Mental Health Services.
Okay, yes,
so
of course. Yep.
Community Mental Health Team. It's the under 18s version of it.
Right. Okay.
And they're very pressured. There's a lot of children on Ireland who are being referred to CAMS at the moment.
Sure.
Significantly higher percentage-wise than the UK, but that's also partly because there isn't much else around on Ireland for young people. So organisations like us, and I'll Listen or other great children-focused charities are there for absolute necessity, I'd say. We're delivering an incredibly impactful and important services.
I guess there's like Cruise, they deal with bereavement.
Yeah, Cruise bereavement. Yeah, then they do some. Yeah, we do. Again, we work quite collaboratively with them.
Parents
absolutely.
As well.
Yeah. Oh, it's awful. It's really really sad. Yeah. Or the children who are on the way to losing their parent as well. that can be a really hard journey. So we do as much as we possibly can. We collaborate with the other charities.
It sounds a really good hub. that provides a precious service. Oh, great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, lovely. Well, thank you for sharing all of that.
Not at all.
Yeah, it's quite a journey, and it sounds as though you're in a really influential and an inspirational kind of piece, really.
Yeah, I hope so. I really hope so. I mean, I kind of sometimes reflect upon my own background. I mean, I talked a little bit at the beginning of this around my complex teenage years, and I try and, it's not about me, but, when you learn from your own experiences and you try and apply them to the work that you do. And so the kids that we work with, sometimes it sounds trite, doesn't it? But, it's that message of don't give up, that, you can always find a way through life, and you can always find something that fits you as a human being. And it's kind of true of the people that kind of want to come and work for the Children's Centre as well. We've all got, I think everybody does, but a lot of people have reasons why they pick a line of work or a career, and, taking on that.
Teachers.
No, exactly. I mean, arguably, why would you want to become a teacher, if you know what I mean? I don't know disrespect to the profession, but it looks like it's a tough job.
Well, especially at the moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you've got so many issues in those sorts of year groups. Yeah.
And broadly, we don't really value teachers as much as we perhaps could do, and yeah, so there's an element of why would you want to take that on as a job? So, but people get very, very committed to the profession, and it defines them as human beings, and so, yeah.
Noble purpose.
Absolutely that. Yeah, absolutely that.
Okay, well, if we move on swiftly to...
Of course.
Because we could talk all day about
I'm sorry,
this.
I did warn you I'm a waffler.
No,
I'm so
it's
sorry.
fine, don't worry. No, you're not a waffler. It's all extremely erudite and on point.
Bless your socks, thank you.
If you don't mind me asking, but my day job, financial planner, what was money for you like growing up? I mean, I get the impression if you were able to leave school and go and play music, then there was an element of
poverty.
Or support, or both.
Okay. I'd go down the poverty line. I was very sort of poor and unemployed for 4 or 5 years. I lived in a sort of slightly humorously referred to as Fight Club house, but lived in a really it was quite a chaotic. It was a very chaotic period in my life. I tried to talk about it positively, but I was around a lot of chaos, and I had very little money up until university, and yes, I managed to work through. I was talking about the kind of job of the orchestra, so I managed to make it work. But and then unfortunately, I picked the arts to work in, which is a very, very badly paid sector. So I've really never been affluent at all. Mum and Dad. I mean, Dad was a pilot by profession, and Mum was a special education needs teacher. So that the family were comfortably off.
Some decent holidays.
Yeah, absolutely. Do yeah, absolutely. And I did see quite a lot of the world in my early teenage years, because Dad had just jump us on the plane and we'd fly around all over, which was kind of amazing experience. And my mum and dad are incredibly supportive. But when you start setting up your own life, and I tried to sort of reset everything and drop out ever so slightly, that kind of language. So I was,
So what are your earliest memories of money then? I mean, you say poverty, but...
I mean, that was my 19 through 23 period of time. I mean, Mum and Dad, they were never flash with money. I mean, a big thing that I remember is that Dad inherited his dad's Robin Reliant, and drove it for a number of years. And there's the kind of the stereotype glamour of an airline pilot, particularly Leonardo DiCaprio in Catch Me If You Can or something like that. That was not my dad at all. Bless his socks if he ever listens to this. But yeah, they had 4 kids, so they had to sort of make ends meet, and really good jobs. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't that there was money around in spades. And my one memory is the bathtub in our downstairs. There was some backing paper on it that had been torn off, and they couldn't get round to renovating it for a number of years. And I can't remember the exact reason why, but it wasn't one of those things that we lived in this kind of affluent experience kind of thing. I just call it normal. It was just a very normal upbringing that I had. Normal in relation to lots of other people. Mum and Dad both worked, yes, but yeah. So me and money was a funny one, really. I've never had a great relationship with money, in the sense of whenever I get money, it seems to evaporate from my fingers almost instantly. But I've always worked. I mean, I had a paper round when I was quite early teenage, and then I worked in a camping shop on a Saturday for £10 a week. So I always tried to generate my own kind of cash, but I've never been good at. I'm not a financial planner. I should never say this. The chairman of my board's probably going to listen to this and kind of look horrified when I say I'm not a financial planner. In my own personal life, I've never been great at kind of.
You have a finance director, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. That's somebody else's job.
But you're your own finance director, though, Joff. That's your responsibility.
Exactly.
You are your own one.
I can delegate.
Yeah.
But it's a really curious question, and I'm very waffly about my answer here. But I'm not bothered by having lots and lots of expensive things in my life, but I'm really aware that money makes life a lot easier to live.
Yeah,
so
gives you choices.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
And it's linked usually to your spending.
No, indeed, yeah. And I think you do, don't you? But you sort of base your life upon the income that you have as well, don't you, really? I think so many people do that. So if you've got very little income, you don't really spend anything. But when you get more income, you spend it all, so you still have no cash.
Well, there's a link between income and happiness, and they show that if you chart your amount of income going up, then the happiness level, it seems to level off at a certain level. And it doesn't make you happy having more than enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's interesting.
It is, yeah. And I think this past couple of years, because it's past couple of years when everything seemed to get expensive for everybody in every sense of the word. We're going to have another sort of reset about our relationship with money, I think.
Education around it would be a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Junior Achievement do quite a lot with that.
Yeah, they do. And they do some great stuff.
They do, yeah.
And it's fascinating. Look at my two girls. I've got a 7.5-year-old and a 6-year-old, and they're starting to play and engage with money. And one of the elder of the two, she gets her teeth have just started falling out, so she gets tooth fairy money, and go and try and spend it in the shops. And she's pretty good with numbers, but there's still that element of like, with this 1p, if I bring this 1p with me, can I get something else with it? And it's it's fascinating, the kind of that this has got 10p written on it, but you still think the 1p will get you something else. So it's interesting. Yeah,
it was man-made. Hardly going to have any natural instinct, are you? Have what to do with it.
Yeah, so. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
No problem.
So, of all the things that you've done throughout your life so far, what's been the most fulfilling for you?
That's a jolly good question. I am genuinely lucky that I've had a fulfilling career. I've had some periods of time where it's been a little bit less fulfilling, but you said it yourself, it's kind of positive ways of looking at things and learning journeys and adapting to change. But I am, it's not to sound all megalomaniacal or something like that, but I believe I am a positive influence on the people that I work with and the work that we do. And I'm very lucky in that sense that, I can hopefully come home every day thinking, yes, I've done something worthwhile. So I'm really proud of that. I try to be humble about it, but I'm really proud of it. And I've worked in some amazing places with some amazing people. And again, I work with some really amazing people now, and that's very lucky as well, because the charity world, I think, draws fantastic people to work in there, and that's really fulfilling as well.
That's great. It's very laudable.
Yeah.
Thank you. And for any existing or aspiring leader, community leader, or even business owner for that matter, what would be, in running an organisation, what would be your number one tip?
Oh, that's a big question. Drink lots of coffee.
Yeah, okay. And another one.
Yeah, exactly. No, my number one tip, the way I approach it, and this isn't maybe necessarily applicable to every business, but it's the way I approach it, is understanding that the people that I work for, and I use that language. So the people I work for are the people who are employed by the charity, and also use the language of clients, the clients we serve. So the children, the vulnerable people that we support. So my role is really to make sure that we get the best out of the team and the best for the people that we support.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my only tip, really. And I approach it as personably as I can. We need to have structures, we need to have accountability, and we need to have plans, and we need to have direction of travel. But I try my hardest to get the best out of people every day. Essentially, is the way I think and the way I approach my role. And I think some other businesses might see it quite differently, but for certainly the world I operate within. And I'm so lucky. I was talking recently to some healthcare professionals about leadership and transformation and change, and I'm in a really lucky situation at the moment that I can actually instigate change within the organisation I work for, because that's my role.
So what's planned next?
For the Children's Centre, one thing we wanted to do, but we've unfortunately had pandemic for a couple of years, is do a really good job of representing the charity to the island, because I think a lot of people still think we are gone, as in the Douglas office has gone, so the Children's Centre has therefore gone.
This is a good start.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. And this is a great opportunity to do things like this. But it's recontextualising the charity so people understand where we help, why we help.
Clarified for me a lot of misperceptions I had. So
right, yeah. Oh, so. Good. Yeah, good. Yeah. But that's our next phase. We've been working quite hard on the farm, and we can't open it to the public every day, but we want to be much better at opening to the public on some days, so people can come and see what we've got and see the kind of work that we do.
Excellent.
Running things like masterclasses, so people get a chance to come and maybe engage with learning a craft or a skill or something of that nature. Mm-hmm. And just, naturally and gradually and purposefully expanding what we have at the farm to make it from, and I do use the word of it's a world class, I'd like to get it to an absolute, just genuinely world class resource and site that people from the UK or Ireland or further afield want to come and see and kind of engage with the way we work. So that's hugely ambitious, but that's the sort of 5-year point or something.
The Isle of Man, that's what good looks like.
Absolutely, yeah absolutely.
Great aim.
Yeah, exactly. I think we can. I think it's achievable. With a bit of hard work, and
I'm sure it is.
Hard work worth doing.
Super, thank you. And so, just to finally, a few questions just to finish off.
Sure.
Who inspires you?
Lots of people inspire me. It's a bit mushy this. My kids inspire me, and it's too easy to kind of say that, but they do. I find such great joy in my two girls. I had the most lovely experience recently.
This is for whom you are an expert storyteller.
Exactly, in my mind. Not necessarily theirs. Love storytelling. I love doing the voices on it. My littlest sometimes goes, "Daddy, stop doing those stupid voies," which is
yeah.
Which is funny.
And who are you being? The Gruffalo? Or
everything.
Hagrid,
yeah, exactly.
Or?
Absolutely. Everything and anything. Yeah, no, a lot of inspiration and joy, and I'm going to get the name of the book wrong. It's the boy, the mole, the fox, and the horse. I don't know if you know it. I forgot the name of the author. It's reasonably recent. It's an illustrated book that was turned into an animation over Christmas
Not
time.
Julia Donaldson.
No, it's not. No, it's lovely. It's such a lovely book, and my elder girl, they're doing it at school, and then they watched the film, and she was desperate for me and her sister to watch it together, and we watched it, and I was such a unique experience because normally it's I'm taking things to them of going, this is a good book, you'll like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or you'll like Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah.
But for my elder girl to bring that to me of a daddy, you'll really like this, was a really moving moment. It was
super.
Amazing. Yeah.
Fantastic, lovely. And are there any books that you've read that would be recently that has been a great source of inspiration for you?
Do you know, the phase that I am at the moment in the way life, work, career, and family is sort of going, I'm not having much time to read books at the moment. So I'm going to go to one that I read when I was younger, unfortunately. And I've always loved science fiction. I've always kind of had a bit of a go towards science fiction. And it was made into a film reasonably recently. But the book June is just I find that quite inspiring.
Is that Frank Herbert?
Yeah, Frank Herbert. Yeah. I mean, there's a series of them after it, but it's June specifically is the one that
it's a good book. That
it's amazing, and I love the ideas within it. And it's huge and it's dense and it takes itself incredibly seriously.
Yeah.
But I kind
George Lucas was a big fan. I think you can possibly tell, can't you, from his Star Wars? Yeah,
and I really do like the most recent film that's being produced.
It was good, wasn't it? Yeah.
Extremely good. Yeah,
I can't wait for the second.
Me too. Yeah, exactly. But again, it takes itself incredibly seriously. But I like that. I like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you've got a favourite quote?
No, I'm afraid I don't have a favourite quote.
Okay.
Do you know, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I think sometimes you can reduce yourself into kind of the life of memes and sort of simple statements that I maybe undermine everything. So I'm afraid to say I should have one, shouldn't I? Bringing a favourite quote. There is a nice one from the boy, the mole, the fox, and the horse, which is asking for help isn't giving up. Asking for help is not giving up.
That's really good.
Which is lovely
quote,
isn't it?
And where would our listeners go to find out more about you?
So about the Children's Centre, the best place is our website, which is www.thechildrenscentre.org.im, and information on our services is all there.
Are you on social at all?
Yes, absolutely. So I think I can't remember the Facebook link, but the Facebook link is also.
We'll tell you what, we'll put all those in the show notes, and then our listeners can find them there. But apart from that, it just remains for me to thank you very much for spending time today and coming in and letting us know all about the
Thank
Isle
you for
Children's
the opportunity.
Centre.
Yeah, thank
and
you.
your role. Thank you so much.
No
Thank you,
problem at all.
Joff.
Thank you.
Island Influencers is a fortnightly podcast. Make sure you don't miss the next episode by clicking the follow button on your podcast platform. A big thanks to the producer and editor of this episode, Catherine Watts and James Spooner at Bear Content. And thank you for listening.